The biggest question, though, that it seems like people have is why does your vaccine require less cold storage than Pfizer, key to distribution?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having me. I think it goes back to the fact that we have been working on mRNA vaccines for more than 5 years. This is the 10th vaccine that we have been running a clinical trial on. The other vaccine that you mentioned, it's the first time that they are doing an infectious disease vaccine. And so over the years, we've invested heavily in science, in process development that allows us now to have a much better storage condition than what we used to have 5 years ago.
Stephane, this is really important because it's going to have a huge impact on distribution. How much of an effect will that stability at a higher temperature have in everybody's ability to be able to get hold of this vaccine?
I think it's a huge impact. We're going to have a vaccine stored at -20 between our factory and the big distribution centers. And those are able to handle that type of product because they're already product approved by the EMEA in Europe, MHRA in the UK, or FDA in the US at -20 Celsius. But what is very important with today's news is we can now, for up to 30 days, have a vaccine stored in a regular fridge at 2 to 8 Celsius, like you do insulin. And as you know, every pharmacy, doctor's office, hospital has that capability. So we think it's a very important game changer. The other piece too, to keep in mind is our vaccine does not require dilution. The other vaccine that you mentioned requires dilution at the site. So you take the vaccine out and you need to dilute it. It's an extra step. What we have to do to get the world back to normal is a massive vaccination campaign that had never really happened before. And so every time we're going to be wasting doing this type of things for our product is going to be an issue. And so we think that between the fridge condition storage and the fact that we do not require any dilution on site, that's going to be a big advantage for nurses and doctors to be able to provide those vaccines quickly to the population who wants it.
Such a good distinction. Have you had conversations with the current administration or the incoming Biden administration about kind of distribution and how to mobilize?
Yes, so the Operation Warp Speed has been working in the US very closely with the CDC for a long time. And we are in daily discussions with them. What we're going to do, as soon as we got an approval or an EUA by the US FDA, is to ship the product via McKesson, who the US government has selected because they are very active in the seasonal flu process, to get the vaccines out to hospital and pharmacies. As I'm sure you read, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, all the big pharmacy chains in the US have signed up to get the vaccine from McKesson to provide administration in the pharmacies. This is also going to be available, in hospitals, in some rural area, in community hospitals or GP's office. So there's a lot of work going on, and this is actually the government taking care of that step, whereas, the military is being involved to help with logistics.
Stephane, one of the key questions as we all watch the case count climbing around the world is what impact will these shots have on transmission? So what effect, if I have this in my arm, will this have on my ability, if I come into contact or get the virus, to transmit it to others?
Yes, and this we don't know yet. What we know from today's data is that if you get our vaccine, you're going to have a 94% chance to have no COVID disease. That's obviously a big deal. But what is even more important, in my opinion, is of a 95 cases of disease that were analyzed yesterday by the independent NIH-led safety board was severe cases, which was the secondary endpoint of that phase 3 study. So 11 of the 95 cases were severe. But what is really remarkable is that of those 11 cases, 11 were with people who got placebo. There were no case reported of people who get the Moderna vaccine. So when you put those two data together, what does it tell you? With the data we have today, it seems that our vaccine, if you get it, you have a very high chance of being with no disease. And if you get disease, most probably you will get mild disease. And if you think about the impact on hospitalization, ICU, and the impact on the economy, where governments around the world are trying to slow down contacts because they want to manage the limited hospital and ICU capacity. So if that problem was to go away by having a vaccine that prevents severe disease like ours seem to do, that's a game changer. To your question about transmission, we will know soon. As part of our study, we're also looking at measuring antibodies that come from the virus, but could not come from the vaccine. And so when we'll have that data, we'll of course share it. It is possible that the vaccine will prevent infection. We have shown that in non-human primates, i.e. in monkeys. But we need, of course, to prove it in human now. We just need a bit more time. But the most important thing is to prevent disease. If people vaccinated will not have disease, we will be in a very different world.
What's the breakdown for the general population versus older people, say those over 65? You had 15 in the trial, right? So what was placebo, which were vaccinated? What was the effect?
Yeah, we don't know all the details yet because remember, the company is blinded. The data is owned and run by the independent safety board. But what we know is that we had only 5 active cases on the drug. And so we anticipate a good response in the elderly. We will know more in a couple of weeks when we have the study finalized and filed to the FDA and MHRA in the UK. But if you look at the phase 1 data, which were published in the New England, we're actually the vaccine of all the vaccines in the clinic that was able to sustain from a 25-year-old to a 75-year-old the same level of antibody for all of the participants in the study. So we are cautiously optimistic that in the elderly and other people with high comorbidity factor, we should have an effective vaccine.
Stephane, Christine Lagarde, the president of the ECB, was asked the other day what her greatest fear was. One of them was war, the other one was mink. How big a fear do you have about mutation? And is messenger ribonucleic acid the best way of dealing with any kind of mutation that we see?
So let me start with your last question. Yes, mRNA is the best technology to deal with mutation. Why? Because we've shown in January that it took us 42 days to go from the sequence published by the Chinese government of the SARS-CoV-2 to shipping to the NIH human-grade quality product. I think we can take this down to around 30 days with the things we've learned and the investment we have made. So if tomorrow there was a new mutation, like the one you mentioned, that could have an impact on the efficacy of a vaccine, we could within a month go back and have a new vaccine. We will not need to do studies anymore because it's the same chemistry for the molecule of mRNA. It's the same manufacturing process. So if you change out of a message that is very long, thousands of letters of genetic code of life, if you change a couple of them for a mutation, you do not have to redo clinical studies anymore. So mRNA is clearly the best adapted for mutation. On the one you mentioned, we are tracking it. We're going to run the experiment very quickly to see does the blood that we have from the humans we were in our phase 1 and our phase 2, does it neutralize the new virus? If it does, we know the vaccine works well. If it doesn't, we can quickly change the sequence and have a new vaccine.
Can you give me some perspective on the side effects?
Yes, the side effects, we've reported the severe side effects in a press release for transparency reason. They are very similar to what you see with other vaccines. We didn't even report the fever because there were less than 2% of cases at fever. And what you see is what you see with commercial vaccine. A bit of pain at the site of injection, a bit of redness for a day or two, both go away with no medication. And at the systemic level, you see some people having some fatigue, especially in the elderly group. You see people having a bit of headache. Again, those things go away usually within a day or so with no medication. Of course, people can take a Tylenol or equivalent and actually not even feel those pains.
Stephane, you mentioned a moment ago about being able to reformulate. How quickly do you think you'll get into kind of 2.0, 3.0? How quickly do you think that cycle will happen? And what improvements do you think you'll be looking for? You mentioned temperature early on as being one of the critical factors. As you look for reformulations, what work are you doing and how improved will be the product and how quickly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think we're, of course, always working on temperature and stability. The 30 days we announced today at fridge temperature is a first step forward because we have that data. We continue to monitor the product that is on stability in other products is multi-dose. So in every vial, you're going to get 10 doses for 10 people. And the reason the entire industry did that is there is not enough filling capacity in the world that was sitting idle to wait for a pandemic. And so by putting 10 doses in one vial, we can, of course, get much quicker product in the marketplace to vaccinate people. But if you think about the potential use for the mid to long term in terms of boosting, it will be much easier to have a single dose vaccination like you have when you get a seasonal flu shot.
Stephane, final question from me. As you said at the beginning of this conversation, you've been working on this for a long time. You were looking to use messenger RNA for other therapies. Can you talk to me about the acceleration you've been through within your business as a result of COVID-19? And I'm looking for silver linings here. Will this help in treatments elsewhere? Will it help with cancer and other areas?
Yes, so the place where it's going to help the most is in infectious disease vaccine. We have 6 vaccines for other infectious disease that are all first in class, meaning no commercial vaccine available. A good example is CMV, cytomegalovirus. It's a virus that drives the #1 cause of birth defects in Europe or in the US. 10,000 kids in the US per year. No vaccine on the market. The whole industry has tried for 20 years to get a CMV vaccine to work. They all failed. Well, we had a positive phase 2 study in September, starting the phase 3 next year. That's a 2 to 5 billion annual peak sale product that we have not licensed, so meaning it's a product 100% for Moderna. And we have many more like this. We just announced we're going to get into the flu business. So what the COVID vaccine has done for Moderna is, one, de-risking of a platform for vaccines, which translates into a lot of value. And 2 is an acceleration for us becoming a commercial company. We were supposed to be commercial in the 23 to 24 timeframe. Well, now it's possible we are being commercial before the end of the year.